everyone, and welcome to Healthy Living Central Florida. I'm your host, Gina Horan. Well, we are celebrating a couple of milestones this month. First of all, we have been around for a year. Can you believe that, Cindy? That is awesome. We've been around for a year on our podcast, and I want to thank Acres Media, of course, and our awesome producer, Cindy Peterson. And I hope to keep going because this is so much fun, and we're learning a lot. And also, it is 1 year since I'm alcohol-free, which is pretty cool. So today I wanted to have an addiction specialist on, and I brought the lovely Linda Fensler.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Gina. It's good to be here.
Well, welcome. And so we met a few months ago. I interviewed you about your book.
Yes.
Called Rising Above Addiction, and we got to chatting, and I really loved your refreshing approach to addiction management, and I really wanted to have you on the podcast, not only to celebrate my year, but also, but also to talk about all the different addictions, all the different ways you can approach things. So let's just start by talking about your background. I think you have a corporate background of addiction specialists, and just let's go with that.
Well, my original background is nursing, although I'm not a nurse. I changed and went into mental health. All my life I've been involved in some form of mental health, whether it be I started promoting a treatment center, and then I went into employee assistance work, which covers a wide range of mental health, from the chronic mentally ill, crisis management, any kind of issue that you can imagine. And yes, we work with corporations. We are the 800 number people call.
So expand on that a little bit. You worked for a corporation, and you were with the crisis, like a crisis management part of it. And so would you be the one to answer the phone, and what happened?
Yes. I first started working for the Adventist Health System. It's now the Advent System. And I worked for an addictionologist, one of the best addictionologists in Chicago, in my opinion, and many others.
What's an addictionologist? That's a new one for me.
Yeah, he was a brain surgeon, actually, this doctor. He worked for Rush Preston St. Luke, one of the best neurological centers in the country, and he became addicted himself to Tylenol with codeine and vodka. And he would balance the brain surgeries by using the Tylenol in his pocket, so that when he started getting the shakes from the lack of alcohol, he could pop a couple Tylenols with codeines. And God's willing, he never lost anybody, but he came close once. But
so the highest of the highest functioning alcoholics.
Oh, very high. He was one of the best surgeons. I mean, they could not believe when they found out that he had that kind of a problem. His boss was just blown away. He said, "Hey, Rich, I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong." He had no idea.
Wow.
But he hit the bottom of the barrel. He was eating out of, he had three suicide attempts. And anyway,
bless him.
Part of my book is honoring him. I started out promoting him, his treatment center. He really helped thousands. He just died last January, and there were over 1,000 people at his funeral. He would quite often pay for treatment if people didn't have the money. He was just very generous. And and then from there, I had a mental health background when I worked for him, but I really wanted to build an EAP for these hospitals in Chicago. There were 6 of them, and I had, after 3 or 4 years, I finally gained enough confidence in the board of directors, and I was able to build their employee assistance program. So I did counseling for these 6 hospitals, and it was general counseling. So we had just about everything you can imagine, and addiction is always 30% of anything an EAP does. So I still feel that the 15 years I worked there, I was really able to work also with a wide range of addictions.
So can you give me and our viewers and listeners an example of somebody that may have called you, or, kind of somebody?
Sure. Well, it could be anyone. It could be someone that's having trouble at work. Their supervisors, they're having trouble with their supervisor. Maybe they need to figure out how to handle situations. Maybe they have to learn how to handle conflict or something like that. But in most cases, it was a relationship issue or an addiction, or maybe an addiction of the son. Maybe a daughter ran away. I mean, it could just be literally anything that you needed help with. Mm-hmm. And the hospital would sponsor 3 to 5 free sessions. And then if we could not resolve it within 3 to 5 sessions, because we're we're really solution-focused counseling. CAPs are solution-focused counselors. If we couldn't get the solution well on its way to being solved, we would refer to either a psychotherapist or a PhD or somebody that, would be able to give them more long-term counseling.
Sure. So can you define solution focus? Like, for example, what?
Yeah, it's more of, if you go to a psychotherapist, they analyze your background. They try to figure out how you developed cognitively the way you did because of your background. But EAP counselors have more of a here and now sort of approach. We call it Gestalt, but it's more of a here and now approach where you come in, what's the problem? Has this ever happened to you before? What kind of skills did you use then? So we try to get at the root of the issue without doing a deep dig into their childhood and all. Because really, that's what the company hires you for. They want to be able to get these people, to anyone, to a more productive state of working in the shortest amount of time. So
and so you would refer them to other people, or you would know where to refer them to.
Yeah, we're also like a resource line, because there were some times when people would come and right away, oh, yeah, this is going to be 20 sessions. They're like addiction.
Right.
You might immediately know this person is really struggling. They're acutely addicted. They need to go somewhere right away. So in those cases, yes.
So my journey, it's really kind of funny because I'm not a big fanfare kind of person. And I just thought, well, I was over drinking, and I wrote in this month's Style magazine kind of a accompanying piece about my journey. And it was really basically like I was really over drinking, and I was over it. And I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. So when I met you, I was a few months in, and we were kind of talking about AA meetings, which, let me just say for the world to know, AA has literally saved millions, if not billions, of lives. And what Bill W. did has, and I know family members and friends, I'm sure you do too, that it has worked for them. And I think it's fantastic. I can't say enough. Here in Central Florida, there's so many resources and churches and spiritual and meditation. And I think that's great as well.
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't say I struggled, but I kind of always was wondering if there was sort of a third part of the stool, the third leg of the stool. Like, what about a scientific approach? What about a brain approach? Yeah. And for me, I, at 58 years old, just got so tired of hangovers, so tired of drinking. It just seemed like I kept drinking because it was there. And so one day I just said, you know what, I'm over it. And I have to thank this podcast as well, because it might have been a little vanity, but also the hypocrisy of sort of craving a White Claw while I'm sitting here talking about health and wellness seemed really lame to me. So that happened a year ago. And I thought of you a lot because of your approach, like the brain approach. And I also, Annie Grace has a podcast, and she's an author, and it's about the brain and about science and chemistry. And it really resonated with me. So for all those people out there who are like me, who kind of didn't really fit in anywhere else, is there a plan? Is that kind of what you do, or what? Am I just talking?
No, you're bringing up some excellent points. In fact, the book I highlight two case studies in my book, and one of them was exactly like what you're feeling. It was a man, and he had been addicted for quite some time, and off and on, sometimes more of a binge drinking situation, but he had been drinking since he was 10 years old. Wow. And he tried going to, his family all encouraged him to go to AA and do all those things that typically people do, intervention.
Absolutely.
It did not work for him, as it doesn't always. For him, when he went into a room and listened to people talking about their drinking experience, he loved it. He felt like, oh, when can I get my next drink?
It kind of makes you want to go out, and have a few.
It did for him.
Right.
And so it was a matter of, as counselors worked with him, it was a matter of them saying to him, this is something that you need to do yourself, and you can train your brain to stop going into those pleasure-seeking channels, you might say.
Sure,
Your brain has certain channels, and if you use them a lot, you kind of go right down one of them. So, we teach, my book, I talk about that, how you can train your brain to go in a different direction. And a lot of it has to do with self-care too, sleeping, a lot of things. And it's all connected.
I love that. So we'll talk about that after our next break. But I did want to say, when you say like going into a room and listening to other people, that really works. That fellowship works with people. People are social creatures. For me, I just thought I could talk. I have 1,000, probably 1,000,000 stories about, and then that one time I was in wherever, and drank and drank and drank. And I just thought this, for me, I was like, no, I need a solution. I want to know, like, what is the deal? Why does this happen? And again, it was really a thing of just looking at my life and going, okay, so I'm over it and I want to stop. Just because, for health reasons and so forth, which we'll talk about. So this sounds like a great place to take a break, Linda. When we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper in with Linda Fensler and Rising Above Addiction. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Is pain or restricted range of motion keeping you on the sidelines? Get back in the game with expert orthopedic care from UF Health Medical Group Orthopedics. UF Health Medical Group Orthopedics provides robotic-assisted surgical joint repairs and replacements, post-operative care, and inpatient rehabilitation services, all close to home, right here in Lake and Sumter counties. And for those unexpected injuries, UF Health Medical Group Orthopedics offers convenient walk-in and same-day appointments. To learn more or to schedule an appointment with one of their specialists, call 352-323-5665.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Healthy Living Central Florida. I'm here with Linda Fensler. She's an author and addiction specialist. Her book is called Rising Above Addiction. We were just talking about my 1-year journey and why sort of the chemical and the scientific, brain things work more for me. And I know that there's a big part of the population that this really does resonate with. So Linda, talk about sort of your approach to addiction and why you wrote the book and some specifics about, how we can rise above.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gina.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I may have mentioned before, I worked for an addictionologist in Chicago, and that's how I got my start. He was very, very good, and he taught me a lot about brain chemistry because he had been a brain surgeon. So before he became addicted himself. But he operated a 12-step program. So 12 steps, I think they're wonderful. And as you said,
absolutely
have saved thousands.
Millions of lives. Yeah, big fan.
But lately, a lot of people, with all the chemicals out there, all the options they have, especially things like gambling that are more of a cognitive addiction, well, we need to know how to change and train our brain to be able to fight the kind of addictions that you can't always see, that don't have a substance involved.
So,
okay. All kinds
shopping, gambling, sexual
addictions. Internet, all of it.
Internet. Okay, so this goes way beyond even just the chemical addictions. It goes beyond. Okay, so that's great. So, for example.
But it is, even if it's not a chemical addiction, what's happening in your brain is very chemical. We used to think when the field was new, we thought the brain was pretty much set and you couldn't do a lot of changing. But we found through neuroplasticity that it's very plastic, it can be changed very easily by our own thoughts and what we focus on. And that's why meditation, prayer, some of these other things really work. And it takes more than that, but that's the start.
Right.
When we work, for instance, I'll give you an example. When we work with women or men who've been physically abused, we train them to do something like autogenic conditioning with the brain because their self-talk is so bad that the self-talk sets up channels in the brain that are linked to behavior. And
you mean they put themselves down, or what?
Yes, and put themselves down. Don't believe they can do things. All the things they've been told in an abusive situation, and so it's very hard to pull themselves away from that because their brain's already so to speak, been programmed that way, either by someone else and then by themselves. They start to do it. So what we do is we have them change the tape and practice different messages that they can give themselves. And it goes deeper than that. If you read my book, you'll see exactly how the brain is responsible for a lot of our behavior. And if we are numbing parts of the brain, especially the back part of the brain, and acting only on the reptilial brain, well, you know what a reptile does. Anything at once. It has no conscience.
Right. Like that's why they
instance.
say the lizard brain just
Yes.
kind of reacts, right?
I had a guy in my office once that, well, a woman was the client, but she brought her husband in, and throughout the session, he admitted that he had killed somebody in a bar. And it was kind of a real ethical question for me. I wasn't sure exactly where to go with that legally, but we did get that sorted out. But yeah, he hadn't remembered it. His wife told him about it, so he knew it happened, but he had no memory of it because he probably was so drunk that
Maybe he was blacked out.
Reptilian, he wasn't blacked out, but the part of your brain that records in a blackout, a lot of times the part of your brain that actually records your actions is blacked out and you're still functioning. It's why so many people get into bar fights that they don't remember and do things they don't remember. So there's a big reason why people want to get sober and operate with full conscience.
Sure.
And, it's very interesting when you start really getting into how the brain is responsible for the link to behavior.
Okay, so we talked about alcohol, and then there's drug addiction and so on. But I'm really curious. Let's say someone, you want to talk to somebody about their shopping addiction.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I have known a lot of friends who, honestly, I had to do interventions because I'm really not kind of a shopping person, but I have a lot of girlfriends who are, and they honestly would just have hordes of bags in their trunk, and that is a real addiction, honestly. So talk about a way, like what you would say to someone or how you would counsel someone with a shopping addiction, for example.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing it up to me, because every addiction has a high level of anxiety involved.
Okay.
High level of anxiety. And we all know anxiety leads to depression. But in the case of a substance that you're taking, the depression gets a lot worse because the substance is pulling your dopamine, serotonin, whatever neurotransmitter it affects. It's pulling that out of your body. Whereas somebody who's not processing a substance that way will be able to reabsorb those neurotransmitters and feel good. All right, the next day, they might both be really sick, or really vomiting, drunk, whatever.
Right, like
high.
the hangover, terrible.
But one of them will go back to a normal level of neurotransmitters where the other one might be just a little bit down because they're actually, the way they're chemically processing their transmitter or their neurotransmitters is different and they're losing that. It's different with shopping, okay? So, but what isn't different is the anxiety level. And we know that other kinds of addictions are usually the result of high anxiety, sometimes depression, sometimes family situations. Something is causing them to rely on that as a form of comfort.
Right, like a filler, like they're trying to fill,
Yeah, so what I do is, with my book, there are a lot of links leading to coping skills for anxiety and other kinds of things. Regulation. A lot of people are deregulated, and they can't seem to regulate their behavior.
What does that mean, deregulated?
Well, they're impulsive. I mean, that's a way to say it, but they just can't seem to regulate their compulsions. And again, a lot of that has to do with the way the brain is operating. It's going down those channels quickly and that lead to behavior where you need to change that through your mind games and things like that. But we would work more if they had an addiction that didn't involve a substance. We would work more with levels of anxiety, sleep, taking care of yourself, ways that you can kind of fight that immediate impulse to do whatever it is you're doing to comfort yourself. There are a million things you can do that don't
Okay.
involve that addiction.
Okay, so then conversely, and the gender disparities between shopping and then gambling, I mean, I'm not saying it's only men and only women,
Right.
but by and large, men have a tendency to have the gambling problem and women have more of the shopping problem. And maybe it's the same neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. That's why you're here to tell us. But if men are online all the time and gambling, and then that really can hurt the family, or even, I guess, shopping because you're spending all this money on stuff that you don't use. But
Right.
where does the anxiety come in? Why is it all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I have one more bet, because there's all kinds of stuff online now, which is, you can just push a button and it's linked to your account and then all your money's gone because of
Yes.
the Super Bowl or because of or even, like cockroaches in a hallway. I mean, like the gambling addiction is there. Where does the anxiety come in?
Well, and you're right to bring up the online gambling. That is such a huge problem right now with casinos actually giving you money to gamble with and then getting into trouble.
Right.
And I need to mention too, the suicide rate with gambling is like 4 to 5 times higher than the suicide rate in any other addiction.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really a serious addiction because
Probably because like you lose money, the home,
all
you're
your friends.
embarrassed. Yeah,
any
your
support
friends.
that you would have, you've alienated most of them, and you're right. You lose your home and a lot of other things too, income. But anyway, the anxiety comes in because when someone is used to relying on a certain behavior to comfort themselves, whatever that might be. People comfort themselves for all kinds of reasons, and it doesn't have to be high anxiety. It can be maybe a family problems they don't know how to solve, or a work problem, or something that is causing them to be upset. Maybe not full-blown anxiety, but they know immediately this is going to help them because the way their brain has been trained to think. And that, okay, whenever I feel this feeling, then I know what's going to make me feel good immediately. And that's where their brain's going to go. Mm-hmm. So what you have to do are developing other coping skills, other behaviors, so that your brain will actually lead you in another direction and link to a different kind of behavior. So that's really what brain training is about.
Well, when we come back, we'll talk a little more specifically about brain training and what we can do to try to overcome our addictions and habits and manage them a little bit better. We will be right back with Linda Fensler. Don't go anywhere.
Nobody wants an aging family member who is unable to care for themselves to be home alone. Lake Center Home Care believes the best healing happens when you are most comfortable. The company provides exceptional personal care in the comfort and privacy of your own home. Whether you need skilled nursing, physical therapy, home health aides, or companion services, your loved ones will enjoy peace of mind knowing you're being taken care of and treated with respect and dignity. Lake Center Home Care is locally owned and managed with a team of highly qualified professionals who are passionate about taking care of their neighbors. Call 352-315-0050 or visit golchc.com to learn more about this amazing company.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm Gina Horan here with Linda Fensler. We're talking about addiction and your book, Rising Above Addiction, and sort of different ways to approach it. And you talked about brain training earlier. And so one thing I wanted to talk about is how the family comes into play, because I know that I've had family members. My dad, bless him, was an alcoholic, and it goes way up the chain on his side. And for the longest time, there's always that question of yourself, but then you don't know, and then things don't work, you're not sure, and then the family members come in, and maybe they don't say anything, or maybe they do, or maybe they give the wrong approach. Talk about what the family can do if they see any addiction, and gambling, the internet, kids with the internet addiction. I mean, the list goes on. It's not just chemical dependencies.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And you feel if you're a family member and you're struggling with this and you don't process substances in an alcoholic manner or a chemical manner, or you don't process your anxiety that way, it's hard to understand. So I think the family members have a lot of trouble figuring out how to help And that's a lot of my book too, is written for the, you can call them codependent, enabler. I don't use those words in my book because they've been so overused. And honestly, everybody is so different. Each case is different, that when you use those coin words like that, somebody gets an image in their mind and they think, oh, it's always like that. No, it's not. Every case is very unique.
Right. And along those lines, for me, the last year, I don't use the word sobriety, and it's, again, AA is awesome. And all that stuff is great. For me, using the word sobriety, I feel like there's other words you can use because, again, if you hear those old tropes,
right,
you kind of go into this moment where I feel like there's so many new ways to approach this. Right. And so I've just been saying, oh, I'm alcohol free. Whether or not anybody says that's right or wrong, it totally works for me because I'm like, I equate it with freedom.
Right.
And I look at bottles of alcohol because I'm a bartender as well. So I'm at work and I'm just like, poison. Right? Because
You're right.
I just feel like if anybody out there who feels like, well, all this other stuff doesn't work for me, or those old words, there is new ways. Or you can, like you said, rewire your brain to say new things where it feels fresh. Again, the old ways are great too, but I just want to say for that bit of the population that I relate to, I love those new ways to do it. So,
and you can still say the Serenity Prayer. You can still
absolutely
say, I have a serene mind. I have a high level of serenity right now.
Yes,
and I don't want to.
It all works, but everything works differently for different people. So when we talked last spring, almost a year ago, you had a particular story about a family member, and it was really sweet. So talk about that a little bit and how that affected your life.
Well, that is in the book, and I don't want to give away something. There's kind of a surprise feature in the book, so I don't want to give that away.
Okay,
but I do have a close family member, and it didn't end well, and that was another motivator for me to write the book. And it's not always going to end well. You hope it does. And this person in my family came really close to making it, but it just didn't end well. But along with all the wonderful work Dr. Reedy did, I wanted to highlight what he did. I wanted to use a lot of his techniques and things that he taught so many people. It has to do with brain training, yes, but it also has to do with different things you can do, like the tapping system and things that it's almost like a acupuncture that you can do on yourself.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about what is the tapping system.
Well, there are things that they do in treatment centers. I have worked for and promoted many treatment centers, probably 3 of them to be specific. And so I'm very well aware of the things that they do to try to regulate people. And there are things, I put all the links in my book, but they are found online. You can find them, but just so you don't have to go looking for them and you can just pull them out when you need them.
Sure.
That's why I put them in there. And some of the more reputable treatment centers are in there too. You don't want to try to detox at home. If you are detoxing at home, there's a way to do it. But anyway, I think the focus being on the family, it is a family disease. And for people who don't process chemicals in the same way that somebody that gets addicted processes chemicals, because their body is actually, in many cases, more efficient. It's better at processing chemicals than, let's say you've got 2 people and I'm processing as somebody who's not really going to be addicted. I'm not going to lose my neurotransmitters when I drink or whatever. And then you've got somebody who really can drink an enormous amount of drink. I mean, much more than I could. That means their liver, their body, is processing very quickly. And so it's very efficient.
Right. You talked about that in our interview.
Yes, it's very efficient.
People are
much more efficient.
Right.
But, Dr. Reedy used to always say it takes the best. And it does. This disease takes the best because they're usually very bright and very creative in many cases. You'll find a lot of people that are bipolar, people that have anxiety issues, people that are OCD, that are very talented. But what happens is the brain deceives them. I think that's the best way to say it.
How? In what way? So the brain deceives them how?
Well, it just it causes these intense cravings because it's a physiological thing, and it's hard to get out of unless you're going to retrain your brain or think differently. And so my book is also for the family members to be able to understand, what can I do? Because in most cases, you can't do anything, but you can lead them in different directions that will help them. But you can't take responsibility for it. You can't tell anybody exactly their path. As you said, you realize there are a lot of things that I've seen people do that are very successful. They just didn't happen to work for me. I had to have my own path. I created my own path, and it worked. And that's impressive, really.
Well, thanks. I mean, like I said, call it vanity. And I was just kind of staring down the barrel of age 60. And I thought, you know what? Let's try something new. Let's, because I feel like there's still a chance. And I kind of wanted to see what it was like not to go to the bar, not to have that cocktail. And it's been awesome. I love it.
How has your life changed?
How's it changed? I mean, I feel clear. I'm never hungover, which I think is like the best thing because as you get older, hangovers are terrible. Like I used to be able to bounce back in my 20s, and then you're in your 50s and it takes 3 days. And then I started getting, I'm wasting all this time, all this money, all these calories, And so the logical side just was like, this is really dumb. So I kind of liken it to Forrest Gump when he ran and ran and ran. He just kept running. And then one day he just stopped and he's like, yeah, I'm over it. And it's a really great feeling. I love it. I highly recommend it, but it's my journey, and I don't know, I'm just happy. That's all, no big whoop, but for me, it's been great. So I don't have any desire anymore. It's just, I'm over it.
I love the fact that you've highlighted so many of the things I put in my book, but there's a whole 2 pages on how your life is going to change. And there are so many positive things that people need to focus on. And this is part of training your brain, actually.
Yeah.
It's a really focusing on those things. Again, I'm going to go back to the person that's been abused. It's the same thing that you do with an abused person. You get them to focus on all these positive things. And their brain, because when you sleep, your brain is going to pick out, and this is explained in the book, but it's going to be like weeding things out that you're not using anymore. Those canals that you're not using anymore, they weed those out. Well, if you're still using all those negative thoughts and like, I got to have a drink. This is what will make me feel good. Your brain's not going to weed that channel out. It's going to go right there. But if you're replacing it with all these other thoughts, all these other things, techniques that you're using, your brain is going to start building different connections. And when does it build those connections? When does it weed? It weeds when you're in deep sleep. That's past REM. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, you should have between 30 to 90. Actually, 30 to 90 is normal. Minutes of deep sleep each night, and a lot of people have watches that can tell you what your deep sleep is.
My
REM
sleep
is
training
good.
watch, right?
REM is right next to deep sleep. It's almost there, but it's not there. Your deep sleep is when your brain is actually able to catalog what you've learned each day. So while you're training your brain, you want it to be able to catalog those things when you sleep. If you're passed out, no cataloging of any new information.
I never thought of it that way.
Because you never get to a deep sleep.
Right.
If you're passed out, your brain just never gets into that deep sleep that it needs to. And that's probably what you're experiencing now when you say you feel clear.
Yes.
That's because your brain is clear. It's clearer.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, I go to the gym instead of the bar, so that's better. That's awesome. And then I think I put on an app about alcohol or whatever, like what you don't spend. So I've saved $8,700 over the last year and hundreds of thousands of calories. And then I think there was an hours one too, or just like thousands or hundreds of hours where I was just drinking, and now I'm doing other stuff. So it's really fun. And I love it. So Linda, can you give us some maybe 5 specifics of how somebody would start, or the tapping, the physical, anything? Where do you begin?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do that will lead up to a healthy lifestyle. And one of the first things to do is, if you do have an EAP counselor, I have to say that because I am a certified EAP, and a lot of people get help that way.
What is EAP?
If you have a company, if you work for any kind of a major company, even small companies have them now, Employee Assistance Program, they provide free counseling because it's usually a person's first thing I can't afford it. And let's say you're not ready for counseling. What else can you do first? First, you can pick up one of these books. You can also look online on YouTube. Find anxiety-related exercises. Find something about deregulation. Read about it because you're deregulated. In other words, you're acting on your impulses because your brain has not, is used to doing that. So that's one thing you can do is look at those YouTube links. Another thing you can do is tell people you're stopping. A lot of people don't want to do that because they want to hold on to that addiction. I might be able to, I might not be able to do it, so I'm not going to tell anybody. They'll think that I'm not able to do it or something. No, tell people this is, and so they can help you. They can remind you or whatever they need. Not nag, but they can remind you maybe. It's the same thing when you're dieting, really, is you want people to be on board with you and you want people to encourage you.
Well, I think sometimes people are afraid of failure. So maybe I'm like this. Like, I don't want to make a big deal out of it because if I fail, then it's a failure.
Yeah.
But I feel like also there are little things you can say, oh, I don't want to, not today, or, oh, I used to drink, and that way you don't feel like you're.
Well, and the thing, I'm glad you said that because you reminded me of something. Some of the things I was talking about when you go on and you look at exercises that will help deregulate.
Yes.
Some of the things that will help you with anxiety are simple things like breathing. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different breathing techniques, and believe me, breathing correctly will help retrain your brain because it's almost like a whole biofeedback thing. Once you're breathing correctly, your brain's going to understand, and your brain's going to say, whether you're still stressed out or not, your brain's going to tell you you're not. And so your blood vessels are going to, open up again. You're going to physiologically change. And those are things that you can do, those kind of exercises while you're preparing. You can always go to AA also, or NA or whatever. Prayer, church, exercise, all the things that you have mentioned.
Little
really.
Rubber band, little.
Yeah.
There are different things I know that people have said.
Monitor your sleep.
Yeah. And Linda, it's so great to see you. I really appreciate your book, Rising Above Addiction. It's called. Now, where can we find your book online?
You can find it on Amazon, just www.risingaboveaddiction.org, not .com.
.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
My website is in the midst of being reworked a little bit, but you'll see the page will come right up. You can click on the link and you can order the book. It's not hard. But please leave a comment or a review.
Okay.
Authors always want reviews. We're always begging for reviews.
Well, that's really sweet. Well, we will. And my review is A+, 5 stars.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for being on the podcast. I did want to give a shout out to Annie Grace as well, because her book, The Naked Mind, is amazing, and they have a really great podcast as well.
It is
for
amazing.
Anybody who, again, AA is awesome,
Yeah.
all the other things, but for anybody who's looking for that, the third leg of that stool, like what are we doing? That is a really great resource.
And Annie
as
Grace
well.
has some great stories too. My
Yes,
book
she
is filled with
does.
stories, and so is hers. My family member that had a problem loved.
I love that, and I love her too.
Love
well,
her.
thanks again, Linda, for being on Healthy Living Central Florida. If you have any questions or comments for us, or you want to be on the podcast, please get a hold of me at Gina at acresmediagroup.com. We will see you next time.